Okay, perfect. So today I would like to start off by introducing guest speaker Dr. Gulce Dikecligil, who is a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Neurology at the University of Pennsylvania. She has received her undergraduate degrees in biomedical engineering and applied mathematics, and also a PhD in neuroscience from Stony Brook University. She is currently studying the human olfactory system in epilepsy patients. I had the pleasure of taking her class in cognitive neuroscience during my first semester at Penn, and she was an amazing, inspiring professor. Please welcome her as she begins her discussion regarding the psychological challenges of research.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I am trying to turn on my video. Can you allow me to do it?
Yeah, sure. Let me see if there we go. That should work. Perfect.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to your amazing conference. I'm very excited to speak today. And thank you, Hiba, for the introduction. So I would like to speak a little bit about my research experience before I get started with the presentation for today. So I did my undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering, thinking that I would go into a field studying the interactions between medicine and the industry and doing engineering work. But during my undergraduate experience, I started doing research in a laboratory that was studying the basis of fear and stress in the human brain. And I was fascinated with this question and this project, and I ended up doing research in this laboratory for 4 years doing my undergraduate. And this experience changed what I wanted to do with my career, and I ended up pursuing a graduate degree in neuroscience as a result of this research experience. And along the years of doing research, many years, and talking to many friends, I've learned a lot about not just the technical aspects of doing research, but also the emotional and the psychological challenges that come with it. Because I think almost 50% of what you do in research and in science, whether it's medical research or purely academic research, in whichever field that you're practicing, it turns out that part of it is technical knowledge, but part of it is the emotional skills, the resilience, navigating the difficulties, navigating the challenges. So today I would like to talk a little bit about these challenges that are specifically common when you are a more junior researcher. And I'm imagining that many of you here are interested in pursuing a career in medicine, and you might be joining research labs, or you might have already joined research labs, and you might already be facing some of these problems. So hopefully what I present today will be of some use to most of you. So with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen. So first of all, I would like to give a brief overview of why, if you're not already doing research, why you should be doing research. So, but let me just, there's a background song. Let me just turn that off real quick. I'm sorry for that. 1 second. Thank you. These are the joys of doing these conferences from home. So I would like to give a few pointers as to why, if you haven't already done so, why you should consider joining a research lab when we are back to the labs and back to the universities, of course, hopefully after the fall semester. So research allows you to learn new skills beyond the coursework. So coursework gives you a lot of technical information, but it doesn't give you often a lot of practical hands-on information. So this is a great advantage of doing research. Another thing is you can already, the knowledge that you've already learned, you can apply this to now practical problems that will come up in the lab. So for example, if you've learned chemistry equations and organic chemistry knowledge, if you're working in a chemistry lab or a biochemistry lab, you will be putting this information to use to solve real life problems. And you will be contributing to scientific progress, which is very important, right? Every bit of effort helps in terms of solving problems and pushing the field forward. And on top of all of this, you would also be learning the behind the scenes of how science is conducted and how things work. Because oftentimes when we're just doing coursework, we are told the end result of research, right? This molecular pathway works like this. But we don't really get to hear how it was discovered or how researchers came about knowing this particular piece of information. So research allows us to actually learn the behind the scenes of how things were conducted. And then you will, by joining a research lab, improve your overall scientific skills in terms of asking good questions, being able to interpret studies and things like that. And lastly, I would like to say that even if research is not your passion in and of itself, and you might be interested in pursuing a more proper medicine and health field in your career, it can help you identify your areas of interest. So, for example, you can learn that you don't like working with your hands, or maybe you can learn that you have a special skill in analyzing data, or maybe you can learn that you're very good at collecting experimental data. So these are all very useful information when you're crafting your career goals for the future. And a lot of the skills you learn, the resilience, the communication, the teamwork, and the scientific skills are all skills that you can transfer to any field in medicine if you pursue that path later on. And there's actually a talk that was done yesterday on how you can get into a lab and how to navigate the research environment. So you guys can go back and look at the talk if you're interested. So let's get to what I want to focus on today, which is the complexities of research and doing research as a junior scientist. Perhaps you're an undergraduate, perhaps you just finished your undergraduate degree and you're looking to gain some experience. So the fun thing about research is that if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research, right? So there's a lot of navigating the unknown and navigating this unknown space that we do in research, unlike what we do in, let's say, standard coursework, where we are given what is known and our goal is to learn it. And as many of you already might know or might have heard about or experienced, there's great days when you're doing research, like this amazing photo from last year when they had the first image of a black hole that was processed on the computer, and you can see the scientist Katie Bauman's response to it. And she's so excited and thrilled to be actually the first human potentially to be seeing this picture, right, this black hole image. But then there's also not so good days, and this is a photo shoot of, I guess, someone who was having a very bad day in the lab and they were very frustrated. And there's a lot of these days in the lab as well. So as you're navigating your research career or your research experience in the lab, you're going to find both of these. And it's possible that some months you're going to have a lot more bad days than good days. Now, before I go ahead, I want to draw some differences between coursework versus research. And the reason why I want to do that is when you're coming into research as an undergraduate or a junior scientist, a lot of your previous experiences have been focused around coursework, right? You've had more than 10 years of experience really honing in your skills on how to navigate coursework and do your best, get good grades, and so forth. But research is not the same. It's a very new experience and it's different. And I would like to highlight how they are different, because I think highlighting how they're different will give us a good sense of why is it that you might find yourself particularly challenged or discouraged or frustrated with research. So first, in coursework, we typically have very clear goals, right? We have to learn this topic for this class, this particular chapter, and we even have subsets of what exact information we have to know or what skills we should acquire. And the path to achieving that goal of learning the topic is very clear, right? You're supposed to study, you're supposed to ask questions, you review your notes and things like that. We all know these. And the next thing is whether you actually are achieving these goals is also pretty obvious along the way, right? If you're studying and you're understanding, you're on the right track. If you're solving problems and you're getting them right, you're on the right track. And also the metric, what we define as the success or the good outcome is very clearly defined. If you get good grades or good feedback, you know you're on the right track. So all of this to say is that coursework, or your current experience so far, is very well structured in terms of telling you exactly what to do, what to expect, and how to get there. In contrast to this, research is very different, right? Because the goals of research are not always as clearly defined. So for example, you might be working with more loose goals, such as finding biomarkers for a particular disease. That's a much broader goal, right? And the path to this goal is more loosely defined. So maybe you have to try some experiments. You don't know which exact experiments to try, how to try them. So there's a lot of feeling in the dark to figure out how to get there. And then whether you're making progress or not is not entirely clear. Maybe you have some experiments that work out, some that don't. Does that mean you're on the right track? Maybe yes, maybe no. And whether you're succeeding is not as clearly defined either, right? There's no grade at the end of the day that your advisor or your mentor gives to you. There's no quiz, or there's no really tangible feedback that says you're doing great or not. So all of these to say that research has a completely different structure, which is a lot more loosely defined, and that can be frustrating and challenging for junior scientists coming into research like yourselves. So I would like to think of it as essentially the difference between running track, where you know where you're running, the path is clear, and you can really optimize yourself in this, versus hiking in the woods. Research is like hiking in the woods a little bit. You might not always know which direction you're headed. You might not always know if there's a path. You might have to make your own path very often. So I would like you guys to keep that in mind when you're transitioning in research and when you're struggling, and maybe you might get down on yourself. Know that you are dealing with a very different set of circumstances that is substantially different. So the point here is that just like you have actually learned over the more than a decade of schoolwork of how to really optimize your own learning and your progress, which skill sets you need, how to execute them. The same is going to be true for research. You have to develop skills, right? And that comes with time, that comes with practice, and that comes with some thinking and some effort. So if you feel like you're not there yet, just that's completely okay. Just know that that's a path that everyone goes through, and it's very normal. So some common negative thoughts that I've had myself when I was first starting out in research, and even sometimes today, and I've heard from many others, my friends, my colleagues, people who are more senior to me, people who are more junior to me, say these sentences, okay? So one thing that's very common is everyone knows what they're doing except me. It seems like you're the only person who's clueless in the lab, in your research project, and everyone else seems like they have it figured out. That's a very common one. The feeling that other people are so much more knowledgeable and skilled. This is also very common, right? The feeling that maybe you're the only one who's really struggling and who's lacking the knowledge and the skills needed, whereas everyone else around you, again, has all the tools they need. The negative thought of and the fear of, what if I mess up? What if I mess up this experiment? What if I break something in the lab? What if I set back someone's experiment? And all these thoughts, the fear of failure, the fear of disappointing others, right? This can be a very common feeling as well. Another one is, if I ask this question, or if I ask for help, or I make a silly comment, my professor or my lab mates, my peers will think a lot less of me, or they will think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And because of this fear, you don't ask for help, you don't ask the questions you have in mind, and that sets you further back, actually. Another thing I want to bring up is the thought that I'm struggling a lot in research, therefore I must not be fit for this. Sometimes in academia, in coursework, we are told that if something comes easy to us, that means that we're really good at it and we should continue to pursue it. But there's also a lot of other skills, like research, where it's meant to be difficult. And by its nature, it's difficult, and it's difficult for everyone. And the fact that you are facing challenges and the fact that you feel lost at times doesn't mean that you shouldn't be there or you're not cut out for it. And the last thing I've already mentioned is this thought that as a junior scientist in a lab, that you should be able to figure out everything on your own, from experiments to scientific questions to techniques, and that asking for help would indicate that you're not doing well on your own, and that you are needy and things like that. So a lot of these thoughts are very common, and they are thoughts that set us back. And I would like to provide some counterpoints to these. Now that we went over these, I want to provide some counter thoughts that might help us. So the first one, everyone else knows what they're doing except me. The reality is that everyone might appear to know what they're doing. Everyone might appear confident, but that might not really be the case. And I found out throughout my more than a decade now of working in research is that many people, even senior people, even professors, even tenured professors, often feel lost, or they feel confused, and they feel like other professors know what they're doing and they don't. And this is because we all have access to a limited amount of skills and knowledge, and that's normal. That's completely okay. It's that when we come together as a group, as a scientific group, as a university, as a field of science, that all these pieces of knowledge and skill come together and create something. So if you're already feeling very behind, know that that's normal and that's okay. And one more point to that is, especially when you're junior, right, an undergrad scientist, it's okay that you may be the only person who knows the least. That's completely okay, and that's totally what is expected. You are living up to the standards that is expected, because what else would you know? You're just starting, right? That's completely normal. Your professors started somewhere as well. There was a day one in the lab for them as well, where they didn't know anything and they were clueless. I've already kind of addressed the second point, that other people are so much more knowledgeable and skilled. This is not an entirely correct perspective. The other one, the fear of messing up. Now, science and research is an endeavor that is almost defined by failures. It is an area by its nature where we make progress by making mistakes. We learn by making mistakes. And this sounds like a cliche, but it's actually very true that if you go to any research lab, if you talk to any researcher, most of their days or most of their careers are defined by the mistakes or the wrong steps or the setbacks. But ultimately, they progress, because it's through those mistakes that they learn. They learn where not to push, what kind of mistakes to avoid, and things like that. So if you're a junior scientist, you're going to mess up, and it's completely okay. It's expected, it's normal, it happens to everyone, especially junior scientists, and your lab mates and your professor will be completely understanding of that. So let go of the fear, try to enjoy the experience, and learn as much as you can without being bogged down by the fear. Kind of related, our peers, our senior mentors will, the fear that they will think less of us if we ask questions. Anyone who is in science, who is doing research, knows that when you first come in, you don't know what you're doing. You may not know what you're doing even when you're senior, because that's the nature of research, but definitely when you're first coming in, you're not going to know what you're doing, and that's completely okay. And people will expect you to ask questions in order to help you. They might not come to you and start explaining, because research doesn't operate in the same way as classwork does. So that's something to keep in mind, that you should have the courage, and you should feel comfortable going around and asking questions, even if you think that they might be silly. That's completely okay. I've mentioned this one a little bit as well. Struggling is okay, and if you're struggling, know that many others are struggling as well, and that's part of the endeavor, that's part of the progress in science. And it certainly does not mean that you shouldn't be there, or you don't deserve to be there, or you are not a good fit for that research environment. And don't think you should figure out everything on your own. When you're junior, it's pretty much that you figure out by talking to other people and getting help. And then as you get more comfortable in the lab and with the experiments you're doing and the tasks that are assigned to you, you might be able to figure things on your own. But even then, it's always encouraged to ask for help. And if you find that you're struggling a little bit, maybe try to identify who are the people that you're the most comfortable with in the lab. They might be your peers, they might be another graduate student who is mentoring you, another postdoc, or it could be your professor. And go to those people and ask them the questions that you want to ask. So I just pulled some tweets from Twitter. This is from an account called Academic Chatter, and they receive these anonymous messages that they then post to their account. And this one is from someone who is just starting their PhD, and they say, I'm feeling really stupid in my classes, like I don't have the smarts or intelligence to be in my PhD program, and that everyone in my cohort is much smarter than me. How do I get past these feelings? So, and you can see that there's already more than 100 likes on this tweet. And this kind of illustrates, it's not research specific, but this person in their PhD is of course going to be doing research, and a lot of their classes revolve around research as well. And they clearly deserve to be there. They were selected to this PhD program. They finished their undergrad, they're in a PhD program, and yet they are doubting themselves, and they're looking at others and making the mistakes that we already talked about, which is attributing a lot of knowledge and skill to others, whereas assuming that you don't have any of those same skills or knowledge, or complementary skills and knowledge. And again, very, very common at different stages of research, of academia, but these are not, I should emphasize that these feelings are not exclusive to academia or to research or to junior scientists. Many, many professionals, especially in these competitive fields, right? Like medicine is a very good example, or law, research, actually go through these thoughts. And some people are able to overcome them, or they have less and less of them as they are more experienced and develop the cognitive and emotional tools to overcome these. But a lot of people feel them. So you might want to talk to your peers and find out that you're not alone. And here's a professor giving advice, again on Twitter, to new graduate students. but this applies to undergraduate students or medical residents or anyone who is new to a field, that they should learn to ask questions and learn ask as many questions as they can, and get over the fear of, asking a question would mean that I'm not good enough. And with that, I want to bring up a point which, when I learned about this, it was a very enlightening moment in my graduate school experience. And it was when I encountered this paper. It was written in 2008. And the paper is titled, as you can see, "The Importance of Stupidity in Scientific Research." And I highly recommend everyone to check this out. It's a relatively short paper, but I pulled some quotes from it, and it's pretty brilliant. So this article starts with discussing the author running into a friend that they haven't seen in many years, and this was someone they considered to be a brilliant, very talented, very smart person. And this friend had dropped out of graduate school and started to pursue a different career. And they said that they dropped out of graduate school because it made them feel stupid. And the author says that, "I kept thinking about it. Sometime the next day, it hit me. Science makes me feel stupid too. It's just that I've gotten used to it. So used to it, in fact, that I actively seek out new opportunities to feel stupid. I wouldn't know what to do without that feeling." So this is coming from someone who's an established professor of many years, and they are openly saying that science makes them feel, quote unquote, stupid, as in they feel like they don't know what they're doing. And that is part of their experience, and that is actually part of what doing science entails. And then they go on to talk about how it was really important that they get comfortable and they actually really grow into this feeling of not knowing, right? We are so used to, especially in coursework, sometimes in medical school as well, and sometimes in undergraduate coursework, that everything is laid out and everything that we should know is out there for us to know. And science is the opposite. We are navigating the unknown. We're navigating what needs to be known, but we don't even know if we're asking the right questions. So the author then says that they talked to someone who ended up becoming a Nobel laureate, and they asked them a question, and the future Nobel laureate said that they didn't know the answer. They had no idea. And the author goes on to say that after this conversation, they learned that the scope of things they didn't know was vast, and for all practical purposes, infinite. And that realization was actually liberating. Not knowing, and there was so much we don't know, and we are just trying our best to navigate it, is a liberating feeling. And when I read this, it was also liberating for me. And I recommend you check out this article. I think it's very useful for many different stages of everyone's career. So now I want to shift gears to make you think about some of these feelings and ask yourself if you've ever felt like the position that you're in, the job or accomplishment that you've achieved, is due to mere luck. Or have you ever felt that you don't deserve your accomplishments, or that your peers or mentors will inevitably find out that you're not really fit for that position or that award? Or that maybe if you have any negative setback, that this is proof that you weren't meant to be there and you don't deserve to be there. So if any of these ring true to you, or if you've ever found yourself at whichever part in your life resonating with these thoughts, then you might actually be one of the millions of people who are experiencing imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is essentially a cluster of feelings. It's not really a psychiatric syndrome, so to speak, but it's a cluster of feelings that's very common, and it's defined by the inability to believe that our success is deserved, or we deserve to be where we are. and that it's by chance that we're there. Okay, and people who have this syndrome, many people who are junior in research will have this. They will find that they're having a hard time accepting their accomplishments, and that they are struggling with anxiety of being found out or making mistakes. And this is a very, very common problem that a lot of people face. So one estimate is that 70% of all people at some point in their life experience imposter syndrome. And this is not specific to a certain subset of humans. Anyone can experience it. So one example, actually, if you look at imposter syndrome that you will find on the internet, is Maya Angelou. She is one of the most brilliant authors that we have, and extremely well accomplished, very well recognized. And despite that, she says, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, they're going to find out. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. She's describing the feeling of fear she has, where she doesn't feel like she truly deserves the accolades that she was given, and that she's going to have to tell everybody that it wasn't her true skills, right? It's going to come out at some point. And here's another cartoon that illustrates this feeling, I think, really well. So one person is introducing their friend, saying, this is Dr. Adams. She's a social psychologist and the world's top expert on imposter syndrome. And the doctor, who's the expert, says, haha, don't be silly. There are lots of scholars who have made more significant. And then they realize that they have actually, despite being the expert on imposter syndrome, they might have it themselves, because they begin by dismissing the compliments, dismissing their accomplishments, and start undermining themselves right away. So this is also a sign of imposter syndrome. And if you resonate with any of these thoughts and the thoughts that come with it, you might be one of the many people who experience this. And very quickly, imposter syndrome leads to a specific kind of misjudgment, where we think that we know a very small part, whereas everyone else knows a lot. And this was something we touched upon in the beginning. Whereas in reality, we know a small part, and other people also know small parts. And depending on their stage in their career and their experience, they might know a little bit more. But in reality, no one knows everything. And when you're navigating a new field, you feel like you're responsible for knowing everything, and that's not true. Even professors who are working in a science field for 40, 50 years sometimes are the first ones to admit that they know a very small percentage of their field, even though they're experts in their own area. And lastly, I want to discuss this new article that came out actually just a week ago in Nature about how to ward off imposter syndrome. And you can find many articles on this, but I listed some of the tips that I resonated with, and hopefully it can help you guys as well if you feel that this is something that you have. So the first one is to recognize that you earned your position. Whatever it might be a research position, it might be a job, it might be your admission into the university that you're in, whatever that you're feeling insecure about, try to make an active effort to think that you actually earned that position, you deserve to be there, and you belong there. And this sense of belonging and the recognizing that you belong there is very important, because feeling part of a community and feeling a sense of belonging really helps us feel confident in what we do. But I would like to also emphasize something here, and this is a long topic, but to briefly mention it, is people who have been historically excluded from areas, right? Minorities, underrepresented groups, women, ethnic minorities, will have a harder time feeling a sense of belonging because we may not feel represented. So we might be more prone to imposter syndrome because we feel like people like us are not represented in the environment that we're in. So this is an additional burden of, higher probability of facing this imposter syndrome, doubting oneself and doubting one's belonging that comes with, belonging to a group that was historically excluded from science, research, medicine, whatever field it may be. And an important thing is to build a group of friends, peers, mentors, people you consider part of your professional network in a friendly way. And you can talk to them about your experience, and you're going to find out that you're not alone. And you're going to find out that your professor is feeling this, the postdoctoral researcher is feeling this, your friends are feeling these things in maybe different ways and different flavors, but it will help you navigate them a lot better and feel less alone. Other point, be your own greatest ally. You have to be your own cheerleader. There's enough opposition to what you want to do out in the world. And if you get down on yourself, that's going to make life very difficult, especially in research, which is already challenging. And this is the last one, is do not compare yourself to others. We know this from many, many other areas of life, because especially in research, the paths are very different. People are walking very different paths, and what looks like progress might turn out to be a setback, and what might look like a setback in your project might actually be progress. So it doesn't make sense to compare. And lastly, accept positive feedback. My last two slides before I finish is another topic which is very common when you're new to research, and that is being really discouraged and frustrated with the frequent mistakes and failures that will inevitably happen. Because as I've mentioned before, science and research is almost defined by progress through mistakes, right? It's very common, and I want you guys to know that it's ubiquitous, right? Mistakes happen all the time, various kinds, silly, not silly. And the fact that you will inevitably make a mistake does not indicate that you're not adequate for the job, for your research position, or for being a doctor or an MD, PhD student or a nurse, okay? So do not take the mistakes personally as an indication of your inadequacy. And I want to make the point that really the setbacks and mistakes are actually a crucial part of scientific path. They're actually a tool that allows us to move forward. If you're trying to find, the hidden treasure behind one of these doors, you have to open all the empty doors before you find the door that leads to the treasure you're looking for. So every door you open that's empty is actually progress, because it leaves you with doors that have a higher probability of leading you to truth. Okay. And on closing remarks, I would like to just emphasize that research is very difficult, and that's its nature. And it's difficult for everyone at very different stages. So make peace with that. Emotional challenges you will face, some of which I've mentioned, some of which I didn't mention, will be very common in others as well. You might think you're the only person, but you're absolutely definitely not, I promise you. In fact, any person you can turn to in your research lab will probably resonate with what you're experiencing. You can build these skill sets to navigate these challenges, just like you build any other skill set. And you should build a network of peers and mentors, even if you are going to stay in a research lab for a short term. That's going to be really crucial for moving your, career forward. And this is a picture from a lab that looked very happy, and they look like they have a good network of peers and mentors, so I wanted to share them. And lastly, thank you for listening, and thank you for being here early on Saturday morning, and best of luck in everyone's paths, whichever path they might be, and best of luck in your challenges, and thank you.
Thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. I know that I got a lot out of it, and I'm really happy that you took the time out to talk about this. I would like everyone to know that since we don't have any questions in the chat, if you have any questions, You can reach out to Professor Naz. I know she'd be happy to answer them. And thank you again. Thank you for taking the time out of your day for this.
Thank you, Hiba, and enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone.
Thank you. And
Thank
now
you.
we'll transition into a break.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Nas and Hiba. We will have a very brief break, 4-minute break, before our next presentation, where we will hear from, I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. Yes, we will be listening Dr. Sharon Lewis's presentation. So please be back in a few minutes.